What's up? Welcome to this video. Yeah, it's gonna start doing stuff here. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be dope. And I'm excited. You know, I think one of the hardest things for us to do as humans is to naturally submit to something or someone, right? We have this natural tendency to want to do things our way. We like to control, to manipulate. We want things done a certain way, according to our standard, whatever that standard is. We like to do things to our liking, right? And it's hard to come under something or someone when we constantly always want things done our way. And we want our lives to be how we want them to be, right? We want it to be. And so I think when you read the Bible, right, you see this natural human tendency revealed in the heart of men, right? Humans. You begin to see that humans tend to have a lot of pride. And because of that pride and ego, they reject God. They set their hearts on things they create, and they bend towards their own gods that they create, right, with their own hands, and reject the one true God. And it's interesting because God created us for Him. Like, He created us to love Him, to walk with Him, to live for Him. He created us to live as ambassadors of His kingdom. He created us to reflect who He is, and to represent who He is here on earth. God is not interested in affirming who we think we are. He's interested in exposing us to our true identity, the one He created and intended us to walk in Him. And so there's a story in the Bible where Jesus teaches His disciples, what it costs to follow Him. And it's actually found in Matthew 16, verse 24 and 25. And Jesus says to His disciples, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." This scene is found in both Luke and Matthew. And in both accounts, the authors indicate that this teaching happens right after Peter signifies that Jesus is the Son of God, right? When Jesus asked him, who do you say that I am? And Peter goes and says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." So Peter had this beautiful revelation of Jesus. And it wasn't that men taught it to him, it was God revealed it to him. And so right after this, right after that happened, Jesus begins to tell His disciples that He has to suffer, He has to die, and that He's going to be raised on the third day. Now, Matthew tells us that after Jesus shares this, private information, Peter begins to rebuke Jesus. Peter begins to tell Jesus, "Far be it from you," that He will never let that happen. And He begins to deny what has to happen, And so after this beautiful revelation that Peter had, he now begins to deny the will of God because he allowed his personal, selfish opinions to get in the way. And so in Matthew, right, we then see Jesus, calling Peter out. He confronts him and says, you know what he calls him? He calls him Satan. He says, "Get behind me, Satan. For you are an offense to me. You are not mindful of the things of God, but of the things of men." So at that point, Peter was blinded to the will of God because he allowed himself to get in the way. And so from this context, right, this is where we get the teaching that we just read in Matthew 16, 24, and 25, where he says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. This is the call that Jesus gives to his disciples. He noticed that Peter was blinded by his own personal selfishness. He allowed his own stubbornness, because he was very stubborn, just like we are, to get in the way. And the call that Jesus gives here wasn't just for them. It's for every potential follower of Christ, including you and me. The call is to deny oneself, take up your cross, and follow him. It's interesting because the word deny here means to disown or reject. Okay, so it means to reject and disown myself, right? My selfish pride, my desires. I have to disown what comes from my own opinions, my own selfish thoughts, and anything against the will of God and against the nature and character of God. And that includes who he created me to be. We have to incline ourselves over to the lordship of God, because in his kingdom, when we come to the Lord, we are surrendering to God. And when we surrender to God, we are allowing him to have authority over us and allowing him to rule and reign over our lives, over and through our lives. And so he governs all, right? And so the next phrase, right? Take up your cross. That's a brutal saying, okay? Because nowadays we look at the cross, right? Somebody wears a necklace of the cross, and we think, oh, you're a Christian. Oh, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. And it is, but back then the cross represented something different. It actually represented death. It represented shame and discomfort. Everyone knew what the Roman cross represented, and everyone knew that the Romans used the cross as a tool to brutally execute people, their enemies. And so the process the criminals would go through was crucifixion, right? And this process was insane. It was a method of torture. It was, you would get beaten, you would get stripped naked, you would hang on a tree outside of the city where travelers will walk by. And you would be like an example to the people who are walking, into Roman territory, to basically, it was Romans, it was Romans' way of saying, this is what happens when you mess with us. It was mockery. It was just brutal. And it wasn't a fast death. It was a slow, painful death. It would take hours and days for someone crucified to die. And it was a slow, painful death. And so it was a form of punishment to humiliate and mock anyone who tried to go against Rome. And so when Jesus says, pick up your cross, okay, this is crazy, because it's meaning that we need to put to death our desires, our thoughts that come from my own self-will. Any thoughts, any selfish desires, any lustful thoughts, anything against the will of God has to die. And that's what the cross represents. It represents death. It is uncomfortable to deny what makes us comfortable. Death isn't comfortable. I mean, I've never died, obviously, but It's just something dying, something, ceasing to exist, something, dead is never a pretty picture. It's always uncomfortable. It's always nasty. It's always gruesome. Um, and when we think of it that way, when we willingly deny our pride and our ego, it causes us to suffer in our humanity, right? In our flesh. It doesn't feel good. It feels very uncomfortable. But that's what the Lord calls us to, because I cannot submit to my own will and to the will of God at the same time. I cannot be full of myself and be full of God at the same time. One has to go. I have to submit to Him. And so this is necessary in order to do this next step, which is to follow Him. The word follow used here means to walk with. It means I go wherever He goes. The words He speaks, I take in and act out. That was the function of a disciple, back then, and I mean it should apply to now as well. The disciples left everything to follow Jesus. They ate with Him. They woke up with Him. They went to sleep, with Him. They traveled everywhere with Him. They had lunch with Him. They went everywhere with Him. The word follow here it's in what's called the present imperative form, which means it is an ongoing action. I have to choose to follow Him every single day. And this is the call of Jesus to everyone who desires to follow Him and live for Him. When we come to Jesus, we lay down our rights. We don't live under our own authority anymore. We now come under the authority of God. I have to continually submit to Him and let every part of me that is selfish, lustful, prideful, self-seeking, die every day so that His life can shine through mine. I think this is why a lot of us have a hard time staying committed to the Lord. Because we aren't willing to submit to Him every day. We are not willing to deny and crucify our selfishness, our pride, our lustful thinking. And so what happens is our hearts become separated, right? It starts to want, some of this, and then a little bit of God. And then it's like an ongoing battle. But the thing is, you can't stay that way. One has to go, because eventually you're going to end up becoming, this unstable, lukewarm person. And that's not what the Lord desires. What the Lord wants is all of us. He wants our hearts. He wants our lives. He is a seeker of the heart. So he looks at what your heart is set on. He knows when your heart is genuinely set on Him and when it's set on other things. And yeah, we're all human, right? We live in this fleshly body that has a bunch of cravings and desires, and it's gnarly to live as a human, right? But that's why we submit to Him daily. You submit to Him by spending time with Him, by getting into His Word, because this is the perfect revelation of God. This reveals who God is and His heart and what He desires from us. And so when we learn to submit to Him by spending time with Him, by spending time in His Word and developing an ear to hear His voice, we end up living lives of worship unto God. And that's what He wants the most. This is the call to everyone who wants to come and follow Jesus. It is a lifestyle of surrender every day. It's not just one time. It is initiated one time, but then it's done every single day. I deny myself. I don't want what my flesh wants. I shouldn't want what my flesh wants, because 10 times out of 10, it is against what God wants. And if I want to live in the will of the Lord, if I want to live for Him, genuinely, I have to submit to Him. So if you've been struggling, because we all do, I do. I've struggled a lot, and it's gotten better over time with me. But even now, right, I'm still in this body. If you are struggling with submitting, with surrendering, if you're going back and forth with your flesh, with your desires, with your pride, with your ego, I want you to take a moment, spend some time with the Lord right now. And I want you to genuinely, from the bottom of your heart, surrender to Him. Cry out to Him from the bottom of your heart, Lord, help me surrender, because we can't do it in our own strength. And give your life over to Him. And I pray that the power of the Holy Spirit comes on you, enters wherever you're at, whether you're in a car or in your room, or even at the gym, and just captures you and captivates you by the power of His love. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this video blesses you and encourages you to continue to live faithfully for the Lord and continue to pursue Him and His love and His beauty and His majesty. Love you guys.